The purpose of this session, as far as I understand it, is that there are certain basic, whether you call it Chassidus concepts or Kabbalah concepts, that people want to hear about, are very popular these days. And anybody who comes to a shiur, to a lecture at a Chabad house, probably wants to hear a little bit about mysticism or Kabbalah, and you have to be able to kind of pass off whatever you're saying as Kabbalistic. So you got to sound a little mystical, a little bit Kabbalistic. So there are a number of inyanim from Kabbalah that Chassidus explains or uses or transforms into Avodah, and we have to become a little more familiar with those ideas. So let's start with the earliest statement about creation. What is the first thing we know about Maaseh Bereshis from Kabbalah? In Kabbalah it says, Kisha'Allah b'retzaynei livrei ha'olam haya eirei hagadol memale es kol ha'cholol, kol ha'mokim. When the Eibishter first wanted to create the world, his light filled all the space, and there was no room for a world. So the Zohar says, Silik eirei hagadol al hatzad. So he removed his light to the sides, v'nishar cholol u'mokem poni, and what remained was an empty hole, a space, and into that hole, into that empty space, he created the world. How did he create the world? First, there was one ray, a kav of light, that came back from that big light. One ray came into the cholol mokem poni, into the empty space, and that kav, that ray of light, is what creates the whole world. What was this ray of light? It was the 10 sfiras. Chachma, Bina, Das, Chesed, Gvura, Teferes, etc. That's how the world was created. When Dr. Weiss was by the Rebbe in Lamed Ches, and he was treating the Rebbe, many interesting conversations took place, which unfortunately he didn't repeat at the time, and then after a while he forgot. But one of the things that he did repeat in time was that he was preparing an injection for the Rebbe. How do you do an injection? You take the needle, the syringe, you put the bottle of medicine onto the needle, and then you pull the plunger of the syringe, you pull it away from the medicine. And the medicine flows into the tube through the needle from the bottle. So he's standing there doing this thing that doctors do with the needle. So the Rebbe said to him, how does that work? You want the medicine to come into the bottle, so you pull the plunger away from the bottle. So he said, you create a vacuum. By pulling down, you're pulling all the air out of the tube, and where there's a vacuum, it draws in the medicine. So the Rebbe said, that's how the Eibishter created the world. He created a vacuum, and that vacuum drew godliness into it. So what it says in Kabbalah, that the Eibishter left an empty space, it wasn't stam, an empty space. Because empty is empty. Empty is meaningless. It wasn't empty, it was a vacuum. A vacuum means that the emptiness is effective. It's not a dead space. It's an emptiness that draws. So, if you want to talk Kabbalah, the first thing you do is you make these mystical statements. God's light was everywhere. And then he removed his light. He made a Tzimtzum. That sounds very impressive. And the Tzimtzum left an empty space. That's called Hester Panim. Very impressive. And then into this space, God shared a finite light made up of 10 attributes. That sounds very mystical. Then you say, now, what value is this information? What does this mean in Chassidic terminology? Chassidus takes the same words or the same idea that we first learn in Kabbalah language and gives it Chassidic language. So, for example, what is called in Kabbalah Oir, Chassidus calls Ratzon. What Kabbalah calls Tzimtzum, Chassidus calls Pnimius. What Kabbalah calls, I don't know what other words to use here, but every word in Kabbalah is replaced by a word of Chassidus that takes the idea from an abstract and impractical level to a personal, practical level. So, what is this Eirei Hagodol, and what is this Mokem Cholol, what is this Tzimtzum, what is it in human language? In human language, it means like this. When the Eibishter decided to create a world, the Eibishter's Ratzon was everywhere. What does that mean? When you decide to do a project and you really want to do it, the entire project is controlled by your Ratzon. In fact, your Ratzon can be so strong that it doesn't let you do the project. When the tainug is so intense, you can't start your project. And this is actually the way it's supposed to be at the beginning of any project. If you're not excited, obviously the project is not going to be successful. If you're only a little bit excited, it'll only be a little bit successful. So you have to be very excited at the beginning of any project. But if you're very excited, you can't function. Because the excitement is too much. Like a person who really wants to learn. Yeshiva Bachar. He really wants to learn. He comes in the morning when he has such a cheshik to learn that he doesn't learn a word. Because the cheshik to learn is too big for the first sentence that he's going to learn. Now, this sentence is not big enough. How do I fit it into this one sentence? So you can't get past the first sentence. So the day goes by, he doesn't know why he didn't learn anything. Because he wants to learn. So if you get very excited about a project, the excitement controls the whole project. There's no room for anything else. You want your kid to be good, and you want him to be good so badly that you don't leave any room for the kid to be good. Because your Ratzon controls and manipulates and monopolizes the whole thing. So there's no room for the project or for the child or for the other person when you're so excited. So in the beginning, when the Eibishter decided to create the world, it was all him. There couldn't be a world. So what did the Eibishter have to do? He had to take some of that excitement away to a side. Put that away. Make a little project. And in this little project, you will have only a little bit of tainug. And then you'll make another project. And in the second project, you'll have a little bit more tainug, but finite. Gvul, not bli gvul. Now, what happened with the original excitement? The original excitement overwhelmed the project. When you're overwhelmed, you have shviras hakelim. The details of the project got overwhelmed. You couldn't function. So what happens? You take this great, endless, infinite tainug and excitement and enthusiasm, and you let it fall. Shviras hakelim. The initial excitement overwhelms, you let it overwhelm. And it falls, it breaks, it crashes. And then you have to start all over again slowly. That's fine. That's the seder of any good project. Where did this big tainug go? It went into the end of the project. When will you feel the original excitement again? When the project is finished. Not until then. Until then, you will feel only little pieces of that excitement. But that real big excitement, when are you going to feel it? When the project is done. Seif maaseh b'machshava tchila. That's what the Medrash means. That on the first day when the Eibishter said, Yehi Oir, he created a light that was too big. So what did he do? He hid it li'emeis HaMoshiach. Why li'emeis HaMoshiach? Because the original excitement that is too big to start your project will come back when you finish the project. In the meantime, you have to find the little bits of pleasure in the individual steps of the project. And it builds. As you get closer to the end of the project, the tainug builds, but it's hidden. It still can't come out yet. It can only come out when it's mamish at the end. And that's why we're told that every mitzvah we do is megala, the Eibishter's tainug in this world, but we won't see it until Mashiach comes. So every mitzvah fulfills the Eibishter's original excitement and enthusiasm for Ma'aseh Bereishis, but when will we see it? When you've done the last final mitzvah, when the project is complete. But more than that, this is all how it affects the Eibishter. That he had to put his tainug aside and he had to wait until the end of the project for the big tainug to be fulfilled. But what about the fact that it's a mokem ponui that creates a vacuum? Without the vacuum, it's all Eibishter. The Eibishter wants, the Eibishter needs, the Eibishter is excited, the Eibishter has tainug, afataiva frekmanish ken kasha, all these things. When the Eibishter created the world, he created in such a way that we should have a taiva. Otherwise, it's only him. So how does it happen that we also have a taiva? How does it happen that we can feel what he feels? He created a vacuum. Created a vacuum. He created an absence of elikus that makes you want elikus. It's a vacuum. He created a darkness that makes you want light. That's Tzimtzum. We use a mashal. Chassidus uses a mashal for Golus. What is Golus? Of course, in the time of Golus, we're lower, but we're higher. What does that mean? So they use a moshel of a Rav and a Talmud. They're learning together. They both love it. He loves being a Rav and he loves being a Talmud. And they're learning very well, and it's going very nicely. And then the Rav wants to teach the Talmud a whole new idea. Something that he didn't plan to teach the Talmud because it's a little bit too high for the Talmud to understand. But now the teacher feels that maybe now he can do it. But he hasn't prepared. So he stops teaching to think how he can present this new idea. Now, if the Talmud is immature, the Talmud will feel that he was abandoned. And the teacher suddenly lost interest, doesn't want to teach him anymore. Finished. No more relationship. This Talmud, if he's immature, can either get angry at the Melamed, at the Rav. Why don't you want to teach me anymore? What did I do wrong? Or he can give up, go into Yiyush. I'll never have a teacher again. This is all over. We used to be good, but no more. If he's not immature, then what happens is the exact opposite. He sees that the Rav floated away to a higher and better world. What happens to the Talmud? He develops this desire, this urgency to know what is that world all about. And because he has this desire to know what that higher world is all about, he has now become capable of understanding the higher lesson that the Rav was going to teach. So when the Rav starts thinking, gets lost in thought, he's doing what is necessary for him to be able to give the next lesson, but at the same time, that itself, the silence, the not talking, makes the Talmud more of a Talmud. Because it makes him want what the Rav has. That's what Golus is. Golus means that we see that there is something about the Eibishter that people in the times of the Beis Hamikdash in Geula didn't know. We see that there's something more to the Eibishter, and we want it. That's the Ad Mosai. Ad Mosai. We're waiting for this greater teaching, for the greater Oir. And it draws us. And we have a taiva for it. And we're waiting 2,000 years for that taiva to be fulfilled. So Ad Mosai. We're still not ready. We still don't want it enough. The vacuum hasn't drawn us enough. So that's how Maaseh Bereshis created a partner for the Eibishter. Because there was this black hole that acts like a vacuum, it created a nivra that wants Elikus. Like a vacuum, it draws us to the Eibishter. And now we have a relationship. The Eibishter wants a Dira B'Tachteinen, and we want the Dira B'Tachteinen. By him it's a taiva that doesn't need any explanation, as we were saying yesterday. And by us, it's also a taiva that doesn't need any explanation. And so we can do a mitzvah lishma. We don't need any explanation. It's a vacuum. It draws us. Then if you want to use this in terms of marriage, relationships, a vacuum is basically a feminine quality. But we generally say feminine means passive, feminine means gentle, feminine means soft. Feminine means a vacuum. It's a silence that draws. It's a passivity that is active, whatever that means. But that's what Edelkeit is. That's what tznius is. Tznius doesn't mean shutting out the world. Tznius means creating a vacuum that draws good attention, positive attention, not negative attention. But it's a vacuum. It draws.